The Russian Defense Ministry issued two news bulletins since President Vladimir Putin ordered a special troop deployment, giving a detailed account of the progress of the operation and the situation in the Donbass republics. Canada announced the abrogation of the health emergency law implemented on February 14th. Hurricane Emanti became the fourth to hit Madagascar in less than a month. Some 250,000 people have been affected. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Emanti from the teleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed that the military operation in Donbass responds to the need to protect the civilian population of the region. The Defense Ministry ordered to treat the non-resisting Ukrainian troops with respect. Now, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu asserted that the operation in Donbass does not involve attacks on Ukrainian cities and does not threaten civilians. The Russian armed forces have launched precision strikes against Ukrainian military infrastructure and report that 74 ground military installations were neutralized, including 11 military airfields, as well as a naval base and 18 radar stations. President Putin reassured in a message to the nation that the purpose of the operation is to protect civilians who have been subject to abuses and genocide during the last 8 years. In Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the Ukrainian conflict with Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi. The Kremlin press office reported that Putin, in a conversation with Modi, said the decision of carrying out a special military operation was based on the grounds of the aggressions made by Kiev in the neighbor territories of Donetsk and Luhansk, while also of the territory of Ukraine by the United States and NATO. Previously, in a televised address to Russians, said circumstances required decisive and immediate actions from Russia, and that the People's Republics of Donbass turned Russia with a request for help. According to Putin, all responsibility for the bloodshed will be on the conscience of ruling regime in Ukraine. He also called on the Ukrainian military not to follow criminal orders of authorities, to lay down their arms and go home. Recently, United States President Joe Biden addressed U.S. citizens following Russia's special military operation in the Donbass region. Biden declared that his government sanctions on Russia will take immediate effect. In his public speech, Biden also stated the U.S. is not acting alone. The head of state stressed Washington has created an alliance with countries from Europe who stand by the current position of the North American nation.
We've been transparent with the world. We've shared declassified evidence about Russia's plans and cyber attacks and false pretexts so that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin was doing. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. I want to be clear, the United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response.
Also in his speech, U.S. President Joe Biden declared that on Friday, NATO will hold a summit that will gather all its members. 30 world leaders are expected to interact at the meeting.
Tomorrow, NATO will convene a summit. We'll be there to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners to affirm our solidarity and to map out the next steps we will take to further strengthen all aspects of our NATO alliance.
Let's take a look at the measures the United States have taken to limit Russia's field of action in the recent events concerning the conflict in the border of Ukraine and the breakaway territories of Donetsk and Luhansk. On the commercial and financial aspect, the United States have imposed sanctions and export controls on 11 Russian state and private-owned entities such as banks and companies from the defense industry. This also applies to over 20 Belarusian enterprises as a response to Minsk's strategic alliance with Moscow, despite that country's president's claims of not taking part in the military operations in the Donbass region. U.S. President Joe Biden also announced Washington targeted U.S. and European individuals and organizations who have ties to the sanctioned Russian entities. Adding up on this, Biden said to have cut off relations with Russia entirely during an appearance where he said the U.S. had no intentions of negotiating with Russia. China called on the parties involved in tensions between Ukraine and Russia not to close the doors to peace and to continue negotiations. China's foreign affairs spokesman Hua Changyan indicated that Beijing is monitoring the situation and urged for calm and for a measured response from all parties involved in the conflict. The spokeswoman also warned its citizens in Ukraine to remain at home away from the windows and to display Chinese flags in their vehicles should they need to go out. All of this transpires in the context of heightened tensions between Russia and Ukraine after President Vladimir Putin ordered a military operation in Donbass to protect the civilian population from Ukrainian hostilities. The Spanish government deployed 800 soldiers at the border between Russia and Ukraine, also sending with fighter jets, combat vehicles, and naval warships. In the framework of the military operations launched by Russia to protect the civilian population in Donbass, the Spanish media reported that Madrid sent around 350 military personnel in Latvia, 150 to Bulgaria, on 3 ships in the Black Sea as part of NATO's so-called deterrence missions. And meanwhile, Defense Minister Margarita Robles added that 4 Eurofighter Typhoon jets were sent to Bulgaria and at least 3 frigates to the Black Sea.
We have tried to explain to you the logic behind our decision to recognize the Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk, insisting on the need to ensure peace and security in their territories. But you did not want to listen to us. You still do not want to listen to us. For you, Donbass is nothing more than a bargaining chip in a political game aimed at weakening Russia. But these are women and children, old men and women, who have been hiding for 8 years because they are afraid of being shelled by the Ukrainians. That is the difference between our approaches, and if you do not change your views, you will never understand this situation.
A market analyst in Frankfurt, Germany, commented on Thursday on rising gold prices and plummeting oil and gas prices after Russia launched a military operation in Ukraine. Robert Halver said that China's reaction to the latest events was being watched closely on the trading floors and that he thought that Putin will be the loser in the long term. Russia's actions prompted Washington and Europe to vow sanctions on Moscow that may disturb the global economy. Stocks plunged and oil prices surged by more than $5 per barrel on Thursday. In the wake of the conflict over Ukraine, the stock index that represents 40 of the largest and most liquid German companies that trade on the Frankfurt Exchange has already fallen by more than 5% in the past 6 trading days. Gas prices in Europe grew by 40%, with a current price above $1,500. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The government of Canada announced the abrogation of the health emergency law that was activated on February 14th in response to the protests carried out by transporters who rejected measures against COVID-19. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the decision after deeming the regulation no longer necessary. The decision comes at the time of the end of the roadblock staged by truckers on the Ambassador Bridge linking Canada and the United States, while the eviction of protesters from the capital, Ottawa, continues. The emergency health law sparked 2 weeks of protests by drivers that prevented the movement of more than $400 million worth of goods between the United States and Canada. And in Panama, the Ministry of Health, referred to as MINSA, seeks to speed up the process of immunization against COVID-19 with the arrival of the 8th batch of Pfizer pediatric vaccines. Health authorities in Panama, which had recently canceled the carnival holidays, are getting ready prior to the arrival of the 8th batch of Pfizer pediatric vaccines to the country to continue the immunization process. According to official statistics from 2021 to this date, a total of 7,555,000 doses have been administered, including 971 doses for children and adolescents and booster shots for adults. On Thursday, the number of new registered cases in Panama stands at 734. And in Bolivia, the United Nations will carry out, alongside experts, a follow-up of the ongoing judicial process against former President Jenny Áñez, according to a protocol signed by the state with the international organization. Our correspondent Freddy Morales tells us the details.
With the signing of this protocol between United Nations and Ministry of Justice, it is expected that the right-wing claims of alleged excess in trial of former President Jenny Áñez will cease. For us, this protocol is a very important step and once again demonstrates the political will of the Ministry and the Ministry in transparency and commitment to international standards. This will allow us, as a United Nations entity, to carry out monitoring with complete transparency and impartiality. Protocol was signed by the Minister of Justice, representing Bolivian government, and United Nations Office for Human Rights, which will monitor all judicial proceedings, starting with one being conducted by state against former President Janine Áñez. And to extend that, we can carry out this monitoring mechanism for a measured transparency in process, and also promote respect for due process. Participation of the international organization is an additional guarantee according to the government. There are judicial processes that are very important for the development of our democracy, so that we have the possibility in the country to be sure that due process is being respected, the fundamental human rights, and mainly the possibility that all entities that have to do with watching over human rights can participate in them. United Nations monitoring will begin immediately. This protocol will apply to all those processes that are currently in Bolivian courts of justice. The most important thing in is impartiality and independence. Trial against Janine Áñez will be held on March 28 and will be virtual. She is accused of 15 violations of Constitution and law committed before she was proclaimed President of Bolivia after coup d'etat against Evo Morales in November 2019. There are 9 defendants, of which 2 former commanders of Air Force and Navy submitted to a short trial and were sentenced to 3 years in prison.
Freddy Morales, teleSUR, Bolivia.
In Cuba, the second day of the official visit to Havana of the President of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, is underway in the framework of the strengthening of bilateral relations. On Wednesday, the Russian parliamentarian held a meeting with Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel, where they highlighted the good relations between the two countries while restating the will to consolidate high-level cooperation in sectors of common interest, including the parliamentary sphere. The Cuban president expressed his gratitude for the humanitarian aid received from the Federation to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Vyacheslav Volodin reaffirmed the State Duma's support and interest on the strengthening of bilateral ties. The head of the Russian legislative body emphasized his denunciation of the United States policy against Cuba and reaffirmed the will to continue establishing exchanges at all levels. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. In Madagascar, Hurricane Emanti became the 4th to hit the country in less than a month, with average winds of 135 kilometers per hour. The weather authorities reported that the new event hit the district of Madagascar. The governmental entity also announced a state of red alert for at least 6 regions in the southeast of the country. Although no deaths have been reported so far, the National Office for Risk Management estimates that the damage to the houses, businesses, and other facilities is substantial. Some 250,000 people in the African island nation have been affected by the tornado. Spain faces the strongest drought in the last 25 years. Rainfall has been 46% lower, affecting farmers and threatening human consumption ahead of summer when water shortages are expected. More details in the following report by our correspondent Sergio Rodrigo.
Juan is an avocado farmer on the tropical coast of Spain. The leaves of these fruit trees are dry due to the lack of rainfall in the area where aquifers are becoming increasingly salty. The situation is almost desperate because the lack of precipitation is causing the aquifers not to be refilled, and the conductivity is rising very high. Since we have to draw water from the wells, we have no availability of renewed water due to the lack of rainfall, and this is causing the plants to burn. Avocado is one of the plants that needs more water, but lack of rainfall threatens the sector. On the other hand, ecologists demand a halt to irrigation permits to grow tropical products. When we think about a solution to this problem, we're not satisfied with the kind of soft solutions that Andalusian government is doing to bring a little bit of water from Nerja to here, to bring a little bit of water from the Costa del Sol to here, a little bit of regenerated water at desalination plants. The moment has come when it is necessary to consider stopping the increase of irrigation. The Viñuela Reservoir is the avocado swamp, which is at 15% of its capacity. One of the problems is the increase in temperatures, according to experts who are warning of water evaporation due to climate change. The prospects of climate change point to a more arid climate in our region. They show to a trend to less rain and higher temperatures, which makes the rainfall that falls less effective because it evaporates faster. The Iberian Peninsula is experiencing one of the worst droughts in the last 25 years. Rainfall has fallen by almost half in 1 year, and the worst is expected for the summer. Lack of rainfall threatens human water consumption in Spain, which is facing one of the worst droughts in decades.
Sergio Rodrigo y Carlos Gil, TeleSUR, España.
A United Nations envoy on Thursday urged Sudanese forces to stop firing live ammunition and tear gas at anti-coup protesters in a crackdown that has killed over 80 people. United Nations Special Envoy Emanti has been in Sudan for the past few days, meeting with leaders, diplomats, and civil society members in a bid to shed light on the crackdown. Demonstrations have persisted in the Northeast African country since Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a military takeover on October 25th, sparking international condemnation and suspension of aid. The coup derailed a fragile power-sharing agreement between the army and civilians negotiated after the 2019 ouster of Omar al-Bashir. The international organization expressed concerns about violations committed by Sudanese authorities and the use of ammunition against protesters, and registered the toll of the clashes at 82 dead and 2,000 injured.
My concern about the security forces' repeated use of excessive force and live ammunition against protesters since the 25th October 2021 coup, and noted that so far at least 82 people have been killed as a result, more than 2,000 injured, and others, mostly women, subjected to acts of sexual violence. I called on the authorities to put to an end the use of excessive force against protesters, lift the state of emergency, release all protesters and activists still held in detention, and ensure prompt and impartial investigation into allegations of human rights violations.
In Syria, thousands of civilians and military personnel whose limbs were marred during the war receive free medical services offered by state institutions and non-governmental associations in several centers set up during the years of war. The civilian institution Kutwa, or STEP in English, is an example of this humanitarian work. Let's find out more in this story.
Nearly 2,000 injured soldiers and civilians were able to recover their physical and motor skills after receiving prostheses and physiotherapy at the specialized center Kutwa. A work carried out by volunteers comprising specialists, experts, technicians, and national doctors in the midst of enormous difficulties caused by the European and U.S. blockade imposed on Syria. About 2,000 amputees have benefited from our work since 2014 to this day, and we really aspire to help more people, but unfortunately the resources we have are limited and the difficulties we face are many due to the blockade that we denounce. It limits our ability to offer this free service to all those who need it, and we regret there are many. The Western blockade affects all aspects of life, including our work, because in addition to the quality of the raw materials we need for the manufacture of prostheses, it negatively affects their costs since we cannot import them directly, which raises their price and delays their arrival in the country, and therefore our work. And all this is a consequence of the unjust sanctions. The Kutwa institution, through its centers in the Damascus Field, Dera, and Tartus governorates, as well as through its outpatient teams, provides amputees with services that include the fabrication and fitting of prostheses, repair and rehabilitation, physical and motor therapy, and physiopsychological support. This work has helped thousands of amputees to improve their sensory and physical condition, and consequently to recover the normal course of their lives, for which they are grateful.
Our work is of a humanitarian nature, seeking to help amputees to radically change their lives and overcome their disabilities so that they may lead a normal life without the help of others. And this makes us feel very good and encourages us to continue with this humanitarian work.
Before installing the artificial legs in this center, I could not exercise my life and had many difficulties to do the most simple and elementary things. But now, thanks to the workers in this center, I have managed to install the prostheses and adapt to them, and now I went back to having a normal life. I'm even working, and I have a business that I am managing like any other person without physical disabilities. The limb feeding process goes through specific steps that begin with the patient's admission to the center for a specialized team to determine the required sizes for their prosthesis and then move on to fabrication and fitting, followed by intensive physiotherapy and motor rehabilitation sessions. A comprehensive work carried out by multiple non-governmental organizations such as the Kutwa Association in support of the management of state institutions in this field.
Hisham Wanous, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
We've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at teleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for our latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Emanti. Thanks for watching.